Hey everybody, welcome to WP Roundtable episode something. Forget the number. Doesn't matter. I'm Kyle. I do WordPress stuff in Jackson, Michigan, and I've got a great guest on the show today. I'm joined by Micah Wood. How you doing, Micah?
Hey, doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. So excited to be chatting with you this fine day. You had a productive Monday so far?
So far, yeah. Lots of technical things I've been working on. Probably bore you with details, but it's been a good day.
Maybe. I don't know. It's difficult to get me bored when we're talking about all this stuff. As you can see, I've been talking to people for years on this show about their entire stories and everything that they do. So I don't quickly lose interest in this stuff. I want to dive into your story and all the things that you do quite shortly. Before we do that, let's share our quick picks of the week. This is where each of us just drops something that we think is worthy of sharing and for other people to check out. And I'm going to say, guess what? Pressnomics is coming back. That's my quick pick of the week. Pressnomics 6. This is their 6th time running the event. It's a WordPress business conference. Really one of the best conferences that I've ever had the privilege of participating. I've attended a couple different times, and it's coming back. And I'm excited about that. Although I'm also really bummed because this year I can't make it due to the dates they chose. I have an immovable conflict. So sad for me, great for everyone else who doesn't have a conflict. Go to Pressnomics. It's well worth your time. Go to pressnomics.com and you can subscribe and get updates or whatever. And that's where all the info is going to be. What about you, Micah? What have you got to share today?
I've never actually been to Pressnomics, so I need to go.
Yeah, it's worthwhile. It is. It's great.
Well, let's see. Quick picks. WordCamp Atlanta is coming up, and speaker deadlines are coming up in the next week, I believe. So I'm going to be going through and helping pick speakers. So if you want to speak, then whoever's listening, apply.
Outstanding. That's a big responsibility. I've had to do it a number of times. Is this your first time, or you've done it before?
This is my first time on an organizing team. So
okay,
yeah, kind of new to it.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. Choosing speakers is kind of fun, and a lot of people want to do it. That's one of the funny things. I was involved in another WordCampy project a couple of years ago, and there were a lot of different volunteers, and everybody opting in got to check the boxes to say what they were interested in helping with. And these are all WordCamp organizing type people, but 100% of people said they wanted to help choose speakers. and that wasn't the case for any other role, like sponsors and swag and food and volunteers and all that stuff. So a lot of people have opinions when it comes to speaker selection, strong opinions as well. And if there are criticisms of the WordCamp, it will come down to the sessions and those that were, what topics were not covered and which ones were not accurately represented ahead of time, and whether there was a diverse enough set of speakers and so on and so forth. So it's a huge responsibility.
But it is, yeah. So hopefully all will go well. But
I'm sure it will. Yeah. Well, that's
no pressure.
Not the point that I don't think it's the point that I was trying to make.
Right.
That's the point I did make. Okay. It's cool. I still enjoy it. And when I'm participating in organizing WordCamps now, it's usually my go-to because I get a lot out of it. And also have a lot of good relationships with many of the speakers who apply, and enjoy the process of doing outreach to try and find, whatever we're missing. If we need other things. There's nothing covering security or accessibility or advanced JavaScript. We gotta go find those people to do that. That can be a lot of fun, very rewarding. And building out a good schedule that just covers a lot of things with a lot of great people and a lot of great topics. It's beautiful. It's very satisfying and rewarding.
Yeah, I think it definitely would be. I can't say that I've done it yet, but it sounds like it would be.
Yeah, well, it will
I've always enjoyed teaching, and I used to do martial arts, and I actually put together my own martial arts curriculum that I taught for a while. So
Wow.
I'm all about like organizing and putting together like streamlined curriculum. So
Is there any particular like discipline of martial arts that you specialize in?
So I've participated in a few different ones. So I started out in American karate, which is an eclectic style. Think of it as a mixture of taekwondo and boxing.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my black belt in that. Meanwhile, I started learning modern arnis, which is stick and knife fighting.
Wow.
And then I got into Kempo, which is a more Chinese style art. So less direct punches and kicks, more indirect, flowy type techniques.
Okay.
And now I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for, I think, the last 9 or 10 years, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
So
I hear a lot about that. I hear a lot about jiu-jitsu. It sounds like it comes across as a very addicting pastime, according to everyone that I've talked to about it.
It's like chess. It's the closest you can get to chess in a martial art, I think.
That's exactly how my friend described it. Just 2 days ago when we were hanging out together and he invited me to go. He said it's like chess.
Yeah, you have to think definitely several moves ahead of the other person. You have to be able to identify like when they're trying to bait you into something and be able to go in most likely with your own bait. So it's very interesting. I kind of got bored with stand-up martial arts because there's only so many ways you can block, kick, or punch. And so, you know, it really comes down to more timing and that kind of thing after a while. Whereas Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, obviously I'm many years in and I still have a lot to learn. So
Wow.
So it's challenging, mentally challenging and physically. So
well, I don't know how many more like strong testimonials I need for me to give it a try, but it's been quite a few at this point.
Yeah, I would say if I had to teach, if I had to put my kids through any given martial art, it would be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Just because it gives them the options. Like, so if they get in a fight at school, right, it gives them the option of fighting without necessarily throwing a punch. So they can actually defend themselves without, you know, punching somebody's face in or doing something a little more extreme than would warrant.
Sure. Okay. That's good logic. Cool. Okay. Well, that's super fun to know. Thank you for sharing that. I want to dive into your story, Micah, and understand how you got to where you are today. You work for Bluehost now. You do WordPress core development, and you've done a lot of things. But you haven't even been with Bluehost for a whole year yet. So there's a lot that precedes this role. Take us back to the beginning days of your career when you first had some vision for where you wanted to go professionally with your life. A young Micah Wood thought, you know, this is the path I'm going to try and walk on. You know, I think I know what's right for me. And what were those first steps you took, and where did you think you were going?
So I always like to back up a step further than people are expecting when I get asked this type of question.
Okay, go right ahead.
Because I technically had an entire career before I started this career. So I like to start with where I was before and kind of what led into where I'm at now. So basically the story starts when I was 10, like many boys, I had a lawnmower and I would go and mow yards, right? And so ultimately my grandfather, that was what he did in retirement. So he introduced me to the wonderful world of making money with a lawnmower. So started picking up clients as he started deciding he didn't want them. And eventually, you know, had a handful of people in the neighborhood before I could drive. Get my driver's license, get a pickup truck, expand the empire. Before long, going all over the Atlanta area, I learned a lot of things about business, like don't try to serve everyone because you're going to spend all your time driving around Atlanta. So ultimately, I ended up going the path of least resistance. So I started going to school. I went to Georgia State University, got my degree in management and marketing and business, thinking that that might actually help me in the lawn care stuff I was doing and maybe help me figure out, what other business opportunities might be out there.
Are you still operating alone at this point?
Well, so I had a couple of friends that would work with me.
Okay.
And then I tried to get some other people to basically, I had a couple trucks, and at one point I was trying to get more people to work and have actually separate crews. But the problem I kept running into is when I wasn't there, people didn't, well, I wouldn't say they didn't do the work. They didn't do a good job of the work.
Okay.
No concern for, oh, there's a hose in the middle of the yard. Maybe I should move that before I mow the yard.
Oh, no.
Things like that. So it's just, there was so much more frustration in trying to get another crew of people. And it was better for me to just operate in a small scale.
Did you have this vision to scale up the business? Is that like your ultimate goal?
No, actually, I never liked the work. I loved the business side of it, but I never liked the work. And so ultimately, I always knew like I wanted to do something else. I just didn't know what that was.
Okay.
So that was kind of where I was. So I was kind of, had all this equipment and spending $80 a day on gas to be able to get work done. And, so it was just a lot of hassle in my mind. And so I decided I was going to make the jump and do something totally different. So I had gotten my business degree, had gotten married, had bought a house. My wife had just graduated and become a teacher. And the economy had just started taking a downturn, right? So, of course, what happens when the economy turns down is everyone goes out and gets a lawnmower, starts mowing grass for $30. But the cool thing about that was that the timing was actually really good for me because everyone was going out and getting a lawnmower and mowing yards for $30. It was really hard for good lawn care companies to find good customers who are willing to pay good money. And that's exactly what I had been doing. Is I had been doing excellent work for people who had high expectations and were willing to pay for it. And then, so when I was ready to exit, it was very easy for me to find someone who's interested in buying my clients because everyone wanted those people at that point. So
sure.
So I sold off all my clients and had enough money in the bank. I was like, well, I will spend 4 months trying something new. And if it doesn't work, then I'll have 2 months to go get a real job, as my family called it. And now granted, like I had never really worked for anyone else up to this point. So my intent was never to actually go get a real job and work for someone.
Wow.
It was just to keep doing what I was and work for myself. So anyways, so right before I had made the decision to go all in and go in the direction I'm about to tell you, I had decided I would play around with the idea of becoming a professional organizer. Because that was kind of one of my superpowers, I guess, is organizing and productivity type stuff. So I was like, oh, I'll just go help businesses with their business processes and, help CEOs and whatever become more organized and get more done. And I'll start down that path. So I joined an association and ultimately ended up on the website committee and was helping them make decisions with their website, which was interesting. And so then I decided after a couple of months of being a part of that association that I didn't think it was a good fit to fall under the professional organizing name for what I was wanting to do. And ultimately, I decided to pivot a little bit. I went completely into internet marketing. So I was helping people do SEO and AdWords, basically.
Wow.
But that was what I was going to go into, right? So I sold off on my lawn care customers and decided I was going to go into that. And all I had done at that point was read a book on SEO. So, but one of my other superpowers is I'm a very quick learner. So I basically decided that the best thing I could do was to hop on the Google search forums and to start answering questions, questions I knew answers to. And then all the ones I didn't know the answers to, I would follow those questions so that when somebody else came to answer them, I would figure out what the correct answer was.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So ultimately, that landed me my first client in Israel about 2 weeks later. I was apparently so prolific. There were not two of me. That she basically, I'd answered 4 or 5 of her questions already. And she's like, reached out in the forums, can I just hire you? I'm like, absolutely. So that was my first client in Israel. And the funniest thing is that I have a friend who had a WordPress shop and was doing internet marketing type stuff as well. And all of his clients were in the Atlanta area. And so I landed my first client in Israel. I landed a client in Australia, I landed a client in the UK, I landed a client in Canada, before I ever got a client in the United States.
Wow.
Meanwhile, he's looking at me, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, internet marketing. It's the power of the internet, right? But yeah, it was fun. So I kind of got into SEO for a while. So that went pretty well. And what I started to realize is that everyone had WordPress sites. So the other thing was I was doing AdWords. So that was kind of a side thing. Learned a little bit about that and had some good successes. Ultimately ended up doing a lot of white label stuff for a company in Australia for a while, and had some other clients. But ultimately, it was a very subjective thing. I wasn't a big fan of subjectivity. So I did get asked by a client in the UK to do some SEO related programming. When he found out that I knew a little bit of programming, he's like, I got this little tiny widget I'd like you to build. And it was super ridiculously cheap pay. And so I was just considering it to be like a experiment, really. He was going to pay me $25 to write a widget.
Okay.
It basically would scrape a website for travel information, and it would show that information in the widget in WordPress. And he wanted to get it on the WordPress.org repository so that he could have a link at the bottom that would link back to his, because that's when everyone was trying to get backlinks to their sites. So anyway, so I built this thing, and then he wanted me to put it on the WordPress.org repository. And I told him, I was like, well, I kind of feel like it's probably against the guidelines to do something like that, but we'll try. So we submitted it, and sure enough, it's a no-go. So he's like, oh, well, appreciate it. But the thing was that he figured out that I could actually code. So then he said, well, I've got this WordPress site that I need built, and I need somebody to tackle it. Would you be willing to do it? I'm like, sure. So for $2,000 and in only 2 months, I was able to put together this site for him. And it turns out it was not your average WordPress project. At the time, it was a relatively complex project. And so my approach was say yes and Google it later, which, it served me well, because at the end of that project, I'd learned a lot about how WordPress worked. I'd written my own WordPress plugin. I had worked with WordPress multi-site. I had worked with BuddyPress. I had worked with, building. So there was this plugin guy written. At the time, there weren't very many event plugins. So I was able to find one event plugin that a guy had written, but he never actually did pagination. So there was no pagination. And so what I found was when you hit about 600 events, it would just crash the page.
Oh, no.
So I reached out to him. I was like, well, can you help me out and help me with pagination or implement pagination? And he just said no. So I implemented pagination in his plugin and sent him the code when I was done, and then had to write an importer because they wanted to have 2,000 events in there. So I had written an importer for all that as well. So lots of things that I had never actually done before. But by the time I was done with that project, it was very easy for me to go find multi-site BuddyPress, whatever projects and do really well. So that's kind of what got me into that. And from that very first project, that very first plugin that I did write was a jQuery slider plugin because the world needed another jQuery slider plugin at the time. Actually, it was the very first jQuery slider plugin that used custom post types right before 3.0 came out.
Wow.
So ultimately, it did well. I think it had about 300,000 downloads after a while.
That's amazing.
So a friend of mine asked me to go and talk at a meetup group in Atlanta about my plugin that I wrote. And so I go and present on it. And at that meetup was a headhunter who introduced me to Mike Schinkel, who I ended up working with for a while. He kind of served as my code mentor. It took me from I kind of know what I'm doing to way better off. And so I learned a lot from him. And ultimately started doing enterprise WordPress development. And then eventually we parted ways and I started working in an agency called Narwhal Digital in Atlanta before I ended up joining Bluehost, working on the WordPress core team. So
outstanding. Yeah.
Long way to say that, but
sure. No. Yeah, it's an interesting story. And there's a lot in it. Some things jump out to me. I like and support the idea that at least when you're in that learning stage, saying yes to things you don't know how to do, it can be okay for a while.
Yeah.
I wonder how you feel about where the point is, or at least maybe in your story, where it was for you, where you actually need to start saying no and learned the value of saying no to things.
Yeah, I think I had done just enough programming as a hobby, I guess. I had built my own lawn care site, for example, when I was in lawn care, but that was all HTML. And then, I had my own karate studio for a while as well. So I had built my own website for that. And that's when I actually learned MySQL and PHP and all that stuff, but never actually touched WordPress. And then it wasn't actually until my friend introduced me to WordPress, who is the guy that I was telling you actually had his own WordPress shop. Mm-hmm. He's also the guy that I brought in when I was on the website committee for the Association of Organizers, who helped that. It was interesting because I was watching from the outside him work with clients and do all that kind of stuff. And then after he introduced me to WordPress, I actually went and kind of rewrote my existing sites in WordPress. So had a little bit of experience, but just enough that I felt like, Google is where to go and I'll figure it out. But yeah, definitely have learned a lot more about saying no. I think one of the big things, actually that same friend, he likes to blog a lot. And one of the things that he blogged about most recently is beware of approaching elephants. So essentially the idea is that an elephant in the distance looks cool. You want to go see it, see what's up. But as it gets closer, it gets to be a little intimidating, and maybe you don't want to be involved with the elephant. Much the same way, it's really cool to say, oh yeah, I'm going to do a WordCamp every month for the rest of the year. And then, who knows what business opportunities that, might come your way. And then all of a sudden you can't complete obligations and stuff because you've planned to go all these places and whatnot. So,
right.
It's different for everybody, but concept is the same,
Yeah.
got to watch
Okay.
out for those things that you say yes to that sneak up on you later, and you're like, crap, why did I ever say that?
They do.
So,
Yeah. I suppose you probably have had experience with it. What were some of the moments where you felt the most overwhelmed?
um, to be honest, I'm trying to think. So I feel like the most overwhelmed is when I try to do too many things. So one of the reasons I actually made the decision, well, the decision I made when I switched over to 100%, I'm selling my lawn care company and I'm going into internet marketing. I also stopped teaching martial arts at the same time. So that was my Ron Swanson moment, where I decided to stop half-assing two things and whole-ass the one thing.
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, so that was big. But yeah, I would say after I started doing development, it was when you would have all these little projects, and they all just happened about the same time. You'd say yes to this one little thing, and then you'd land a big one, and then or you'd said yes to maybe two or three little projects, and then you had one big one, and now all the little projects are just clients are being super annoying and pesky, and then you can't concentrate on the big project. So those are the times I think where it was just super frustrating because there's so much going on and you felt like you couldn't actually honor any of the obligations that you wanted to, with 100% intention on actually getting all the stuff done on time and delivering it well and doing a quality job. Not being able to meet those expectations, I think, is one of the big things for me. So
Sure. Well, let's go to the job you have now. You said last May you started working for Bluehost in a bit of an interesting role. So, how'd you come across this job? What attracted you to it?
yeah, so I, at the time, was working at an agency doing a lot of enterprise work. I was leading a team of developers, at one time as large as 10 developers, maybe a few more, depending on timing. But so ended up doing lots of projects, one after the other, big projects. You know, if the client's not happy, then your only job is to make them happy. So I don't know, agency work, it was just, it got super, it's always busy. But after a while, it drains you, right? Because you have so much going on. There's project after project and it just doesn't stop.
Preaching to the choir, man. I know.
So that was kind of one of the big things for me, is like, well, I kind of need a change of pace. And I wasn't really looking for a job, but I never said no if somebody wanted to explain an opportunity. And, so I'm always open. So I had known Mike Hansen for a few years, just seeing him around WordCamps and stuff, because that was one of my favorite things to do, is to go to WordCamps. It was one of the things that didn't necessarily bring me a whole lot of business value, but I'd still go all the time. So anyway, so we happened to meet up. I think it was WordCamp Raleigh in May, and I had just given a talk on Gutenberg. So we had a big Gutenberg project where we were about to launch a site, and so I gave a talk on that, and then I had just met another guy from New Mexico who had also given a talk, and we were sitting down at the after party. Basically, we were the only people, I think, at the after party with computers out, and we were just comparing Gutenberg blocks, basically.
Wow.
So anyway, so we were just geeking out, and all of a sudden, some of the Bluehost guys were coming up, and we had been talking with some of them just before, but they were coming and checking it out, and so we were all just sitting there, and one of them brought up that they were looking for a React developer. and particularly intrigued me that they were looking for a React developer, because there's only one reason a company who's interested in, WordPress developers that know React, what they would be interested in. So I was curious. So they explained that they were looking for someone who knew React to be on this WordPress core team. And so ended up following up on that, and sounded like a super cool opportunity to be able to contribute back to core. I was already doing a lot with Gutenberg at the time anyways. So seemed like a good fit. And so far I've been extremely happy. Definitely, not quite the breakneck pace. I get to have a little bit of say in what I work on, and I get to see it through. And so it's good.
Wow. I've gotten to talk to a couple other people in similar positions. Mike Schroeder and Aaron Campbell come to mind. A few people who are able to spend basically all of their time contributing to the WordPress project like you are now. Did you have a background in contributing in any way to the project before the job?
Not really. I always called myself a stealth contributor, because the closest I'd come to actually contributing to WordPress core is I'd wrote a blog post and created a function that I was writing about, and somebody else got it into core for me. So,
Okay. Sure.
So yeah, that was technically, not really me trying at all, but
Sure.
but yeah, not really had any experience with contribution before that. I mean, I kind of had the general idea of how it worked, but hadn't actually any time to do that. So,
how interesting. It must have been, I don't know. I want to know more about the experience, like diving into it for the first time, because WordPress is a massive project, and there's so much going on. So many people, especially people coming in and out of their project all the time, operating on a volunteer basis. How, given that you were someone not like very actively developing for core as a part of that team, like, how did you jump in and find a place where you could make an impact and start getting to work?
that was one of the first things that I think was hardest, was actually finding something to work on that I didn't feel like 14 other people had already jumped onto.
Right.
And particularly, I think one of the things that was super helpful was the fact that Gutenberg was a thing and that it was in GitHub. And so it made the workflow a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to not have to learn all the little things, like how to apply patches, and I knew how to work with SVN, but patches seemed annoying. And
yeah.
So
A little bit.
So the workflow was a little bit more straightforward in that there's a ticket, you can do a pull request from your own repo, and somebody will review it. And reviewing it, you could actually see the code. You didn't have to apply any kind of patch or anything to be able to see it. So I could help look at other people's code and say, this is super simple change. Yeah, looks good to me. So, and the nice thing was that because I was actually on the Bluehost core team, and we were actively contributing to Gutenberg, we were added to essentially the Gutenberg team, kind of the outsiders Gutenberg team. So we were actually able to help review pull requests, provided it's nothing too complicated where we really needed more eyes than ours. But so it was kind of fun being able to jump in, having worked with React for quite a while. It wasn't a far stretch for me, but Gutenberg, definitely, if you don't know React, that would be super difficult, I think, to jump into. The workflow would definitely be nice, but that would probably be about all you have going for you. There's still super difficult to jump in and say, oh, here's something that's not being worked on that I actually understand.
Okay.
because well, so many people jump on the things that are easy. Sometimes when you're new,
Yeah.
they put those tags in there and say, only new contributors or whatever, but still, there's so many people working on WordPress and Gutenberg even, you always felt like you were taking something that 10 other people had already started. So
Sure. Yeah, I know the feeling. Uh, I, I, was it really like, were you thrown in and needed to figure out how to swim on your own, or was there anyone pointing in a direction for you, like whether it be on your team or anyone like from the WordPress core team who said, "Hey, welcome, Micah. Here's some suggestions or direction."
So, well, that was one thing I think was really nice was we actually were able to have occasional meetings with Josefa, and she knew kind of the direction or the priorities, I guess, that Gutenberg had, and was able to kind of guide us and say, this is a component that needs some work. Nobody's allocated this right now. It's probably not a newbie task. If you could spend some time here, that would be super helpful.
Okay.
So that was the interesting thing, is I wasn't necessarily throwing on the easy tasks, because really, like, I knew enough. It wasn't difficult to jump in and solve more complex problems. It was really more of just an issue of figuring out where to focus time and effort. So we were kind of given a handful of things like, okay, so no one's working on these. There's a little bit more complicated. If you need help, hit up so-and-so on Slack, kind of thing. So it wasn't too bad, but
I can only imagine. It seemed like it must be chaotic. It's not like a big company. You're not jumping into it just like a large corporation, which could have easily just as many people contributing to a project. But there's actual structure and hierarchies and assigned roles and clear delegation. This is, well, a WordPress project is not quite like that.
right, yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things where I know they have like some getting started contributing type guides, stuff they typically run through on like contributor days and that kind of stuff. But really, yeah, that I feel like is probably a lot of what's missing is okay, so if you really want to find the newbie tasks, do XYZ, filter down by this, and then you'll be looking at stuff that, is important, is easy, and you could probably help with because nobody else is doing it. I think that's probably what's really missing more than anything right now, is pointing people in that direction so that they feel like they're making an impact, because they're doing something helpful. But at the same time, they don't feel like, them and 100 other people are racing to finish something.
Sure.
Because, a lot of people that contribute, they only do it part-time and a few hours a week, maybe. So, if they don't feel like 10 other people are going to come along and tackle it, then, they'd be more motivated, I think, to see something through,
Sure.
even though it takes a little bit longer. But.
For sure. Is there anything more Bluehost related that you ever get to be involved in?
Yeah, so technically my time allotment's about 80% on core and about 20% on internal stuff.
Okay.
And from doing enterprise WordPress work, I really enjoy kind of the higher, I don't know, best way to explain it, but there's a higher expectation of quality for one, but more so than that, there's just a more interesting things going on. You have scale. There's little pieces of code that could break things in big ways, which may not be a problem on smaller sites and that kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting at Bluehost because there's a primary focus on smaller sites, but at scale. So it's kind of one of those things where all the little things that all the little sites don't think of are the things that we have to think of for them. to make sure everything works and nothing breaks and that kind of thing. So, and we actually get to be a little behind the scenes and see, out of all the sites at Bluehost, how many people use X plugin, kind of thing. So,
Okay.
So we get to see a little bit more stats and things, which is kind of fun.
You have said that you're interested in productivity related stuff, and a lot of us are, I don't know, passively interested in that, especially those of us in more self-driven roles like the self-employed, or those of us kind of setting our own schedules. Where have you gone down this kind of productivity trail, and what have you learned to maximize your own productivity?
So I never really thought of myself as a very, I don't know, I always was fairly organized. So I saw myself as an organized person early on, and not necessarily a productive person, although I think I was more productive than most people. It's just kind of one of those things you don't see about yourself until you later down the road,
Yeah.
So there were certain aspects of business, for example, at the lawn care company I had, that I didn't particularly like. I didn't particularly like creating proposals. So I figured out a way to reduce a proposal down to 4 drop-down fields in an Excel spreadsheet that would automatically generate a proposal for me, which was really kind of my first foray into programming, besides creating a Microsoft Access database for my stamp collection. But, well, yeah, technically I started programming at 8, but I was like a one-time thing. I don't think I touched any more code until much later. But anyway, that aside, I would find ways of automating or making things simpler, which obviously made me more productive, which is kind of one of the things I like about programming, is that when I need to get something done, I can typically automate it. But then you kind of run into that situation where you can't automate everything. There kind of comes that point where you really do have to become a little bit more knowledgeable of what productivity and all that kind of stuff. So, so I've actually been listening to an audiobook. You may or may not have heard about it. It's called The Productivity Project. Basically, it's about a guy who spent an entire year of his life testing all the theories on productivity and trying to come to conclusive best practices, I guess, in productivity and that kind of thing. So,
wow.
Ultimately, the general definition of productivity that he gives is managing not just your time, but also your attention and your energy. So I think really one of the biggest things that I had to realize, particularly as a developer, when you have 180 tabs open in in your browser, and you're just jumping around and doing all this different things, is really just focusing your attention. So turning off Slack, turning off HipChat or whatever archaic thing you were using, and shut down the email tab, shut down all the tabs that you're not using, focus in on the one task that you're doing, and get it done. So I kind of, one of the things I've settled in on that's really helped me is just picking 3 things I'm going to do in a day, and making sure that I've got about a 1 hour to 1.5 hour time slot to focus in on those things. There's always going to be meetings or other things that happen during the day, so you're not really going to be able to avoid those. But I can typically find 3 slots of time for my 3 things that I'm going to do, and so I can focus in, and even if I don't get it done, at least I start it. That's the problem most of the time, is it's intimidating. You procrastinate. You never actually start the task that you're supposed to do. Yeah. So actually getting it started, that's the half the battle. Once you start, it's usually not so bad, and you can keep going. But
for sure.
But the other big thing is weekly planning. So every Sunday evening, I take an hour and I actually plan out my entire week. I look at my calendar, figure out actually, up to my left over here is my whiteboard, which has it's already got days of the week and everything on there. So I actually just write down on the whiteboard all my events and things, and then I block off the little time slots for my 3 things every day. And then every day has a focus. So I have a particular focus thing that I want to focus on every day. And so every week that rotates through. And so I'll try to focus in on a particular thing and get, that I think having more of a focus in one area, again, focusing your attention, focusing your energy in one area is definitely going to make you more productive. So I've found that to be true, but
gotcha.
So it's always work in progress, because you can always be more productive, but
yeah, we always can. Is there anything related to your you said your attention? What about your energy? Is there anything you've done relating to your sleep habits and diet and exercise and the rest that has impacted your productivity?
So one of the biggest things was just getting up in the morning and working out. I had never actually worked out before until I threw my back out about 1.5 years ago. Spent 2 days laying on the floor until my wife finally convinced me we should probably do something about this, because it's not going to get better on its own. So, went to the doctor. He's basically saying, if you don't take better care of your back, then this will happen again. So that was the day that I decided I was going to try to do something with that. Also, I'd been diagnosed with pre-diabetes. So not really full-on diabetes, but pre-diabetes. So I was, had more weight on me than I should have. So I was like, well, I'm going to put the effort in, I'm going to lose some weight, try to do some work to get my back in shape. So I started weightlifting. So I've been doing martial arts for, since I was 13, basically. But but that wasn't necessarily something I did often enough to get a terribly wonderful workout, because the problem with doing something for a really long time is you become more efficient at it. Yeah. And so it becomes less and less of a workout and more of a fun thing to do. So still get a little bit of a workout, but it's not enough, right? Mm. And probably not the best thing for my back to be doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and rolling around on the ground. So decided I was going to do some weightlifting and got into doing that a little bit. But my personality type is, when I get into something, I go deep. So I always try to learn from a place of experience. So a lot of people will just learn as much as they can about working out or whatever, and then decide to go and do it. But then they're really confused because they've, heard 10 different people tell them 10 different things about how they should do it. And so then they just feel overwhelmed and they don't do it very long, and they probably not disciplined enough to do it anyway, but it's easier to quit when you're confused. So, right. I just decided I was going to start doing some basic stuff. So I found one guy who did, a beginner weightlifting program. It's a 12-week thing. So I started doing that and started losing some weight. I remember going to WordCamp Orlando, and the first time ever, someone was like, "Wow, how long have you been working out?" Wow. So, market difference from my physique previously. Okay. And, so that felt good. And so I was really just trying to be consistent with it. And so after the 12-week program, I started doing a different program. And this program was 5 days a week. It was pretty intense. And so I got a few weeks in and basically started to burn out. So I decided that the most important thing is not that I work out, but I am consistent in working out. Mm-hmm. So if I keep on this 5-week program, I'm going to start working out less and less. And every time I don't work out is just another excuse for me to not work out the next day. So I decided that I should definitely stick to 3 days a week, because it's not too much, but it's enough to work, right? Mm-hmm. So I decided to just stick to 3 days a week. And even though I didn't have another program I was going to do, I was just going to keep doing similar things and try to learn more about weightlifting and fitness and all that kind of stuff. Diet. I hadn't really paid any attention to diet at all until, sadly enough, about a year and a half ago. So actually making an attempt to like eat better, exercise, all that kind of good stuff. Mm-hmm. And really, it's been interesting. So, now I know a lot more about all the different types of programs and different ways that you might work muscles, and more general concepts that apply to fitness and working out, that make it easy to it's a lot easier for me to walk in and say I'm going to do XYZ today and know that I'm working all the right body parts, and not overdoing bench presses or something,
For sure.
and not counteracting it with face pulls or something else. But so I don't know. It's been fun. Definitely made some progress in that department. So
good.
And my back has not given me any trouble. So that's the most important part.
Yeah, that's outstanding.
And I've lost about 20 pounds. So.
Well, congratulations. Good job. You're an inspiration.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, time's winding down, so I want to hit you with kind of the last handful of questions I got. Sure. What's on your calendar for the rest of this year, where people might see you in person?
Yeah, so I will be speaking at WordCamp Miami. So I haven't actually been to WordCamp Miami yet, so this will be a first for me.
Congratulations. That's a big stage.
Yeah. I will be at WordCamp Atlanta, and I intend to be at WordCamp US as well. Maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll go to WordCamp Europe, but we'll see.
All right.
Yeah, and I'll probably be at some other WordCamps along the way, but those are the ones I know for sure right now.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good. Do you have any good recommendations of guests that I should invite on this show in the future?
Trying to think. Also trying to think of people you haven't already had on the show. That's the harder part. I think you've been doing this for a while, so
it's good.
So, well, let's see. What is your ideal guest?
Shoot. I think I like to find people who have good stories to tell, that haven't been told many times already, and whose story is different than the stories I've heard. After interviewing like a couple hundred people, I hear a lot of very common trajectories, similar tales.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's fun to hear something that is just totally different sometimes.
So if you want off the wall, there's a great guy in Tennessee called Mickey Tribbett. He's not afraid to try anything. He once bought his own ice cream truck. He's tried street performing, and he has a WordPress development company, among many other things.
Wow.
So he's got some great stories. And they're not the typical, oh yeah, I've heard that 100 times kind of stories. So
yeah, well, that sounds perfect. Yeah, I'd love to talk with him. Okay, well, it's getting to be wrap up time and dinner time for me. It's probably nearing the end of your work day. You want to just let us know where people can follow you online?
Sure. So website is wpscholar.com. Twitter is wpscholar. Handle on Slack, WordPress Slack, is wpscholar. So pretty much if you just Google WP Scholar, you should be able to find me. So easy enough.
Cool. Well, thank you, Micah, for sharing your time with me today. This has been an awesome discussion, and thanks for all you do to make WordPress better.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.